The path we have chosen for the present is full of hazards, as all paths are. But it is the one most consistent with our character and courage as a nation.
Stay tuned for current events and human interest news. Here is your hostess, Christina Zahrani.
Welcome to the Christina Zahrani podcast show, where I cover the news as I see it, current events and human interest stories. Today, we're going to be talking about the possibility of thermonuclear war. Would it ever happen? If it did, are we prepared as citizens? If not, what should we do to be prepared, just in case? I think we all have noticed that there have been some changes out here across the world, especially in the West. Since the last election, the push for digital IDs, we have noticed that there has been division pushed into the school systems, the workforce, the media. It almost seems like they are intentionally trying to divide people so that they are very distracted and hating one another. We've got the LGBTQ community riled up. We've got parents riled up. We have children confused, depressed, going through all sorts of things. Our families are in turmoil. Our fossil fuel industry appears to be having a real battle on its hands. I have no problems with alternative energies. I think alternative energies are fantastic. But I also think that we need to continue to use fossil fuels to a certain degree. We can't just take that away from people that have to have that. And there are people that need fossil fuels and do not have a choice whether there's an alternative energy source available. They would still need fossil fuels. And we need fossil fuels to energize the systems that produce the alternative energies. So there's a big argument on both sides. There should be no argument. We should be using all available resources and use whichever one is best for whatever the purpose might be. We're going to hear from Jimmy what he thinks is going on with our governments right now and the economy and the media.
Again, I don't know what's happening over in Europe, but in the United States, our government is completely captured by corporations. And the military-industrial complex, at the snap of a finger, can get $100 billion sent to the most corrupt country in Europe. And we don't even know where that money's going. In fact, not only are that we don't not know where it's going, but when people want to track the money, people in power in the United States, in our Congress, block that legislation at the behest of the military-industrial complex. So we can't even track where that. So this is 100% corruption. And that's the thing about Americans. They don't realize that. They think their government is regular corrupt. Like, oh, Trump gave his son a job. Biden gave his son a job. That's regular corruption. What they don't realize is that the whole entire war is corrupt. It's all one big grift. What they don't realize is the entire military-industrial complex is a big grift. We spend 10 times more in our military than the rest of the goddamn world combined. We are completely corrupted in America. This is not any... People try to say, oh, we have to vote to save our democracy. We haven't had democracy in the United States for decades, and that is not hyperbole. Your government, your democracy was stolen from you decades ago, right? Which is why half the country is poor, low income, 80% of workers live paycheck to paycheck, 50% of wage earners earn less than $30,000 a year. Nobody has, we still don't have health care in America. You go bankrupt if you get sick, you get bankrupt if you go to college, and we're spending endless trillions of dollars on empire and war while we still have people living under every bridge. You know, I get up in comedy clubs in Los Angeles where people don't know I'm going to be there, so they're not my fans. So when I get on stage, I'm talking to regular people, a cross-section of America, and I'll say, hey, you know, isn't it amazing we can send $100 billion to Ukraine? And you know, if we're sending $100 billion in weapons to a country, it's because we care about their people. Everybody laughs when I say that. And then I say, I don't care if they send $100 billion to Ukraine. I just wish they would send $100 billion to the United States. And the crowds go crazy because they realize we're living in a completely corrupted society. So what we need now is for people to lose all hope in the system. So what the AOC and Bernie Sanders are there to do is to keep you believing that the system is going to somehow serve you. It is not. The system is there to crush you while it extracts wealth upwards, which is exactly what they did with COVID. They did a thing called the CARES Act. That was their legislation to help people during COVID. What it was a $5 trillion grift that took money from the U.S. Treasury and gave it to the richest couple of thousand people in the country. You know, in other countries, when they did lockdowns, they made sure the workers got their paycheck. You know, they didn't do that in the United States. They did it in every other country except here. They just locked you down. Then they promised they were going to give you $2,000 in relief, and they didn't even do that. They gave you $1,400. So they've been crushing people in America. And what the establishment has been doing, they implemented a controlled demolition of our economy. And what they want you to do is blame your neighbor for the pain you're feeling because of that, because your neighbor wouldn't take a vaccine that didn't work the way they said it did in the first place. Well, I'm not going to hate my neighbor, and I'm not going to blame my neighbor for the pain I'm feeling because he's being crushed just like everybody else by the same oligarchs. I'm going to join with my neighbor, and I'm going to oppose the oligarchy. And that's the thing that scares them the most. When the left and the right realize we have more in common that separates us and we share a common enemy, that's actually how shit gets done. And that's why I'm inviting people from the Republican Party, people from the Democratic Party, from the Green Party. I hope the Green Party can show up and be anti-war. It would be nice to see the Green Party actually be anti-war. So I'm inviting everybody from all, I don't care if you're a socialist, a communist, a libertarian, a right-wing Republican, a left-wing Democrat. I implore you to show up and fight against the hegemony, the imperialism, the war machine that is raping the world and stealing our future.
So hearing that, I could see that he was pretty riled up. But if you're really feeling like your country is under attack and that the citizens that you care about and live with are being harmed in some way, if you are a moral, ethical, compassionate person, you would get riled up. What's happening with our governments, our politics, that could push us into a potential nuclear war? Most wars are not logical. They're all about greed and power, and you are not going to let the other side win. That might push somebody to launch those nuclear missiles. And if that happened, are you and I prepared to protect ourselves and our families? Do we know what to do in a situation like that? What if we didn't get any warning? What if we just got that 30-minute warning, the blast warning, that flash of light? Do you know what to do? Would I know what to do? Would our children know what to do? In the 60s, we were all trained. Children were trained in schools what to do. Duck and cover. Duck and cover. There were drills all the time. There were shelters available everywhere, and they were accessible. We paid for those shelters as citizens. Those shelters are still there, but they are not active and they are not accessible. So if there is a nuclear problem, no matter what it might be, whether it's just one situation or a world war, we need to write our congressmen, we need to let our mayors of our cities know that those bomb shelters need to be opened and accessible to people. We paid for those. We have a right to use those if we need them. In the 60s and 70s, we had shelters built near our homes, or we had root cellars. Root cellars are a fantastic alternative to protection if there is a nuclear war. If someone is living in an apartment and they have no basement, no way to get to a shelter, no accessible shelter, and they don't have a root cellar, would they know how to protect themselves? Stay tuned throughout this video, because this video might have the information necessary to save you and your family if something was to occur. Now, hopefully, we never have a nuclear situation on our hands, but there is no way to predict if we would really have that or not. And so in hindsight, it's better to be safe than sorry. So please listen through to the end. You will get some really good information, and you will get step-by-step instructions on how to protect you and your family should there be a nuclear strike, no matter where you are, no matter what country you're in. If there's a nuclear strike, you'll get some information on how to protect yourselves. Now we're going to take a look at a simulation, an artificial intelligence computerized simulation of what would happen if we had a full-blown nuclear war and we were hit by Russia.
It's considered Russia to be most likely to begin a nuclear war. Time is accelerated to simplify the viewing of the events, and they are divided into 3 stages: nuclear war, nuclear fallout, and nuclear winter. Simulation ready. Declassified mode activated. For context, population of nations engaged at war. NATO member states have 944 million people. The Russian Federation has 145 million people. Stage 1. Nuclear war. Elapsed time: 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours, 6 hours, 7 hours, 8 hours, 9 hours, 10 hours, 11 hours, 12 hours, 13 hours, 14 hours, 15 hours, 16 hours, 17 hours, 18 hours, 19 hours, 20 hours, 21 hours, 22 hours, 23 hours, 24 hours. Total global casualties at 178 million people. Losses of nations engaged at war. NATO member states have lost 9.1% of their total population. The Russian Federation has lost 62.9% of its total population. Stage 2, nuclear fallout. Elapsed time: 3 days, 6 days, 9 days, 12 days, 15 days, 18 days, 21 days, 24 days, 27 days, 30 days. Maximum radiation levels recorded, shown by degrees of latitude, in rem units. Total global casualties at 186 million people. Stage 3, nuclear winter. Elapsed time: 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, 7 months, 8 months, 9 months, 10 months. Minimum temperature recorded, shown by degrees of latitude, in Celsius degrees. Total global casualties at 548 million people. End of the simulation. Stand by. Conclusions. During the stage of nuclear war, only the engaged nations were affected directly, and casualties were limited to military facilities and cities targeted as part of tactical and retaliatory attacks. On this first stage, we saw the highest number of deaths in the shortest amount of time. During the stage of nuclear fallout, irradiated material in the form of dust was carried by wind currents to every corner of the planet, causing deaths related to radiation sickness, and setting the stage for a nuclear winter. Deaths in this period increased relatively slowly. During the stage of nuclear winter, the presence of dust in the atmosphere dropped temperatures worldwide, causing mass deaths of plants, animals, and people who could...
I myself have prepped to a certain degree for many years now, because I know, because I've been around long enough to know that things are not always as safe as we would wish them to be. And I have honestly had to use my supplies on a rare occasion, in rare situations. So myself right now, where I have this studio set up, is an apartment on an upper floor with no basement available.
You're not normally going to be in close proximity to a fallout shelter. You need to be able to quickly put plastic and tape around your windows and doors, and even vents such as an exhaust vent inside your bathroom. The sooner you can get your windows and doors covered, the better off you'll be, obviously. Plan to shelter in place at a bare minimum of 48 hours, a full 2 days. Radioactivity due to fallout will be 1/100% as strong after 48 hours under normal circumstances. And if you could at all possibly do it, you need to stay sheltered inside, not going outside at all for approximately 1 week. And it helps dramatically within a week and after, or perhaps even 2 weeks, after a good heavy rain. Generally, fallout is only 1/1000th as strong as it was originally. It's always good, of course, to have water stored. As preppers, we know that for many reasons, not just a nuclear accident or an explosion.
As a parent, as a neighbor, as a concerned citizen, and as someone who's been around for quite some time, but I won't tell you the exact amount because I didn't want to give away my age, but I can tell you that in the United States of America, we used to have an organization through the government that was paid for by the people, our tax dollars, that was set up to inform us about all of these things and to give us case scenarios and to educate us and to help us prepare for just such a situation. This organization was abolished by the U.S. government in the mid-90s. I believe it was 1996. The OTA. I happen to still have one of those manuals from that organization. We're going to go back through time now and take a look at an informational video that was produced for the citizens of the United States of America in just such a case. Take a look at this and it will show you the information on how to help protect yourself and your family if you get caught in a nuclear attack, outdoors or indoors.
Fallout, which may occur miles and miles away from the blast. You need to know about fallout, what it is, how to detect it, and what to do to protect yourself against it. Thousands of tons of atomized earth, building materials, rocks, and gases may be thrown into the air. And the mushroom cloud containing them sometimes moves as high as 100,000 feet, nearly 20 miles up. Some of the radioactive particles spill out near the explosion site. Others may be carried for 10, 50, 100 miles or more, is when the fallout is settling through the air. This starts any time from about 1/2 hour to several hours after the explosion, depending on how far away you are, and it continues to fall for an hour or longer. Usually you can see the fallout, so if there has been an explosion of a nuclear weapon within a few hundred miles of you, you should suspect every unusual concentration of dust in the air of being fallout. Just what can you do if fallout comes your way? Find the best shelter you can. The more solid substance you can put between yourself and the fallout, the better. But an ordinary frame house with windows closed will give considerable protection. In a house, it's best to get on the floor, away from doors and windows. Or if you can, find a location with additional walls in the center of the building. A basement is even better if the house has one. But all this special shelter talk won't help very much if you are caught way out on the open road. If that happens, keep driving until you see a building, which may be a house or barn, church or school. Drive as close to the building as you can. Then get yourself and your family out of the car and take cover in the building. If the explosion has been some miles away, you will have time to fill tubs and other containers with water before fallout arrives. All locations where outside dust does not penetrate will be safe storage points for water. You can go out for very brief periods if you are well covered and keep the dust off your skin. Wear heavy boots or shoes and pants tucked in or tied around the bottom to keep dust out. If any dust gets on you, brush it off promptly. And when you have a chance, wash it off. That dust can burn your skin. But what happens if you do get exposed to a great deal of fallout? Food or water has been contaminated by the dust, internal damage may occur. When dust has been left on skin, there will be skin burns. When you have been near dust too long, there may be radiation sickness. Exposure can even cause death. If you have had considerable exposure, you will vomit and grow weak. But after a few hours, this sensation will pass, and by the next day, you may have had the last of it. Even if you have been exposed to excessive fallout, you may eat and drink just as you normally would. But don't force yourself. Keep an eye on your condition for the next few days. Watch especially for these developments in the 2 weeks following exposure. Return of nausea, sore throat, bruise spots developing without any known reason, loss of hair. These conditions, or nosebleed, or diarrhea, should be reported to a doctor or to the nearest first aid station set up under civil defense plans. During an alert, keep your portable radio tuned to the Conelrad radio frequencies, 640 and 1240 on the AM dial, for the latest reports and advice. Right now, today, before there is an alert, take time to learn the Civil Defense 5 steps to safety. Learn warning signals and what they mean. Learn your community plan for emergency action. Learn protection from radioactive fallout. Learn first aid and home emergency preparedness steps. And learn how to use Conelrad 640 or 1240 on the AM dial for official directions.
The company that we're missing right now is the OTA, Office of Technology Assessment. And this is their guide. You can see how thick it is. This explains everything. It has maps and shows you what happens to the USSR, Russia, along with what happens to the United States of America if we have a blast. For example, we have this map. It shows which states are more likely to be hit because they have underground active missiles. It talks about the radius of the radiation and the fallout, with miles surrounding the impact area, ground zero. It has a lot of data talking about the USSR, Russia, and where they would be hit by the United States, as well as our country. I will try and link some of this information for you all in the description below. It talks about terrorist weapons at ground zero and how that would impact us. This is a sketch of Detroit, Michigan. If Detroit was hit and the wind was going in the direction of the circles that you can see there, The OTA still has their website up because they know how important it is for people to have this information. And I will link their website address in the description below if you're watching on YouTube or Rumble. If you're not, just do a little Google web search for the OTA website and you should be able to find it. Now we're going to get a little bit of information on what happens and what you can do to protect yourself if you happen to get caught just walking around outside and you don't have time to get into some type of a shelter.
If you want to live. If you're caught outside when a nuclear bomb explodes and you're well outside the bomb's fireball, you might survive if you do the following. 1. Do not look at the explosion's flash. It will blind you even with sunglasses on. 2. Immediately take cover behind something. Don't waste time deciding where to move. You only have a second to take cover before the heat wave comes. 3. Lie down flat and cover your head. 4. If possible, cover your exposed skin. 5. Wait until the heat and blast waves pass. Depending how far away you are, the blast wave may be over 30 seconds after the flash and heat wave. 6. Cover your mouth and nose with a mask or your shirt. This can help reduce the amount of radioactive fallout you breathe in. 7. Get to an underground shelter or the nearest concrete building or basement. 8. Decontaminate and shelter for 72 hours. Okay, I'm Kiram. This is Survival Tips for Civilians. Follow me on YouTube if you want to live.
Now let's take a look at some maps with the wind directions and how safe you would be in different areas of the country from the fallout radiation, the dust that comes from the clouds.
Coverage, and you can see vast swaths of the western United States are pretty much safe, with the exception of, like I said, up here, we're in the northern central, where a lot of the missile silos and whatnot are. Eastern seaboard is still rightly proper fucked, as they say. South Florida and everything here, not looking too bad, but again, everything from West Texas up through here is, up through the left side of the map is pretty safe. Now, one thing, like I've mentioned, every map pretty much shows the eastern seaboard being a bad place to be. Almost every map also shows the best place to be, which is what I'm getting into with this next one here as well, is pretty much, and this one's the slightly worse, I'm going from best to worst, or like most optimistic to least optimistic in terms of how these maps look. So the next one here is slightly worse with how windswept the area is, but still, you're noticing the trend all the way up here, pretty much Oregon if you had to pick a state, but northern Nevada, nobody cares about anything there. Sorry, everyone who lives there. Like I does a pioneer and everything. He's in a perfect spot. But yeah, there's no targets there. And more importantly, the prevailing winds from other likely targets don't send anything that direction. So Northern California, Northern Nevada, Southwest Oregon, Southeast Oregon, but even the West doesn't seem to be too bad. And Central Idaho seem to be the best spots. Here's the last map, which is probably the worst, and it's still depending on the winds going a different direction. A lot of the country's covered in these. Now, keep in mind, though, look at this, the legend down here. Most of these areas, even though they're blanketed, are ones that would not be too bad if you can shelter effectively for even 48 hours. As you see here, the lighter pink says up to 2 days, 2 days to 1 week. So if you could really prepare your structure and do the things that they talk about, like the JJ and Chris Martinson talk about in the videos I'll link below, and stay sheltered for like a week, a lot of these places you'll still be okay. But as you can see, there's almost no risk in the area that I was talking about.
I'm going to show you a really fast clip from our government for our time period. And you can really see the difference between the informational material that was given to us in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s versus what they're giving us today in the 21st century, 2000 to 23. Basically what they're saying is you're on your own. We're not going to give you any extra information. Just, go inside and you'll be okay. I find this to be extremely disturbing. There hasn't been any changes in the data, the information, the experience of a thermonuclear explosion and what you can do to protect yourself as a citizen. And yet the information coming out now is just a little tiny snippet of a video that you have to search for. The government doesn't make sure that you have this information. It's not taught in the schools. It isn't provided in the workplace, even in any government entity that I know of. And it's not provided to the American people. I haven't gotten a manual in the mail. If you go to your library, you may be able to find something. But I think it's really disturbing because we need to know these things. We have a right to know all the information, and we have a right to be protected. We have a right to have information that helps protect us. These are our tax dollars. These are our lives. This is our country. This is our world. We all have a right to be protected.
A nuclear explosion produces dust-like radioactive material that travels through the air and falls to the ground. Protecting yourself from high levels of radiation after a nuclear explosion can save your life. Follow these simple steps to reduce your risks from radiation. First, quickly get inside a solid, secure building. Go to the basement of a multi-story building or the center of a single-story structure. Stay tuned to TV, radio, or the internet for updates from authorities. Get inside. Stay tuned to protect yourself and help others.
Now we're going to hear just a little bit about what's going on right now recently and some opinions about possible nuclear war and a little bit of a comparison as to what has happened out in Afghanistan and what appears to be happening now. So let's take a listen to this.
In my opinion, as I've said before, we will see conventional U.S. forces on the ground in the Ukraine. I've said it 2 years ago that it would be 2 years. I think it's maybe about a year from now that we'll see that. And that means America will have we will have engaged in another foreign land war. I think we're already there. I think this is the U.S. government being too cute by half by saying, we're just sending money, we're just sending tanks, we're just sending ammo, we're just sending battery systems, we're just sending SAMs. We're not sending people, so we're not in a war with the Ukraine. Well, what happens with all that equipment if you fast forward to Afghanistan 20 years down the road? We just gave away all that equipment because the Biden administration didn't want to bring it back. And you know who took it? Russia and China. Are we setting up the Ukraine to be another modern-day Afghanistan? I think so. This is exactly the roadmap that was taken into Afghanistan by our government for 2 decades. And it led to the death of over 5,000 American soldiers and $2 trillion in treasure spent there. And a disastrous withdrawal that has left Afghanistan on the precipice of going into another self-inflicted implosion. But I still am just as worried about a global conflict, a global war that involves our American soldiers. And I just don't see how all these people in the Senate who say it's our moral duty to go out and fund this fight for the Ukraine, I just couldn't disagree more. It's our moral duty to protect American interest if you're the United States Congress and you've been sent there by the American people to do just that. And I don't know exactly where it's going, but unfortunately, this is where I see it going because these steps that have been taken are almost identical to the steps we took that got us into Afghanistan for so long. And it's not like this Congress is going to turn around and say, okay, that's it. Every week or every other week, we hear about another billion going over there, or another 2 billion going over there, or another program going over there, another system set going over there. These things can't just travel in a vacuum. People have to go with both the money and the machinery. And our people are going over there. It's just a question of when is it going to be a uniformed soldier?
So then there's still this question. What happens if one of these people on the ground, Americans that are doing the support work, for example, for the Abrams tanks, gets killed by a strike, a Russian strike, for example? What does that mean?
From our definition, that's an act of war against the United States of America when you kill a uniformed soldier. You know, what happens when an aid worker dies? Like we lost so many in Afghanistan. What happens when charities start going into the Ukraine, American charities, and people start taken hostage? What happens when contractors, like we've seen already, American, non-military, former military, who are over there in the fight, get killed? Those questions have not been answered, and Congress hasn't even prepared the American public to take that questioning on. It's as if they don't want to address that just now because they know that is the eventuality that is coming, that they have taken the steps to lead us right to that.
I hope that this information was helpful to you. I in no way want to scare you or make you feel like you have things to worry about and you can't focus on your happiness and your hopes and your dreams in the world right now. My intention is to just inform you that you need to be careful and you need to be prepared. There's nothing any of us can do to stop any of this that I'm aware of. We've tried to stop governments from doing harm to others and to ourselves many times before, and it takes a big majority with a lot of loud voices and commitment and banding together to do that. And I just don't see that happening anytime soon. So what we can do is we can be informed and we can get ready and we can be prepared as we can be. And then we go through our lives living happily, doing the things that we want to do each day, and we hope and pray for the best. We hope and pray that something bad like this never happens. But it's best to be prepared. Thank you for listening today. I will talk to you next week. Have a fantastic day.
Thank you for watching today. If you find value here and would like to support this channel, please consider making a donation to one of the links posted.